Hi, and welcome to Girl Bi, the only podcast on the internet bringing the queer conversation to the so-called norm. Today, our special guest comes from Washington State, somebody who will definitely show you the best camping tricks and probably teach you how to have the most fun in the middle of the woods. Nikki, welcome to Girl Bi. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. And this is round two of the intro because I was not recording. So, for everybody that is listening, let tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from.
My name is Nikki. I grew up in Washington State, in central Washington, the Wenatchee area. I grew up with a pretty Southern Baptist religious upbringing, which most of my family is still identifies as that. And so I had that belief. I went to a Christian college and struggled with my own sexual identity until I was about 27 years old. My first, you'd call it lesbian encounter, was at my Christian college when I was about 22. And at that time, I just thought what I had experienced was wrong. There was a lot of shame around feeling of attraction towards the same sex. And I believed I was born with a type of, illness or sickness. Whenever any feelings of attraction towards women would come up, I would shove those aside and try to, in a sense, pray the gay away. But as I reached about 27, I started doing a lot of research. I read books about people that deconstructed, that were raised very religious, but were also gay. I started doing a lot of research on the theology of the Bible verses that were used to justify being gay as a sin, and really struggled with the idea that a so-called loving God would create people, as the Bible says, before I knew you, you were wonderfully made, and create them gay, and then say that that would be a sin to live as they were created. So as I began to deconstruct my faith, it felt genuine to be able to express that to the people that I was closest to in my life. So I slowly just started doing that. I told my closest friends, about 5 people. I told my family, and I was genuinely surprised at a lot of the responses, as they were mostly positive, mostly not surprised. When I was about 23, I had told one person, which was my cousin, who is gay, and so we shared kind of this little secret between the two of us, which definitely was helpful to be able to process. And he was a lot of the reason that I was able to start doing some of that deconstruction, as he had began that himself, and started questioning those things himself. We were both raised Baptist, both had very similar upbringings, although we lived in different states, but very, very similar family structure. And so we kind of did that together, side by side, which was great to have someone else that could really relate. Yeah, I came out to my closest friends, came out to my parents, and that was the hardest, was being able to tell them, I don't agree. I don't think that this is wrong. I don't think that
Yeah.
a loving creator would, create people to be one way and then say that it's wrong to be that way. So that was a process, and that was definitely definitely some difficult times where they needed the time that they needed to take to kind of pull back, and they needed to do their own internal processing. And I'm pretty close with my family, so I would talk to my mom every other day at that time, and my dad at least once or twice a week. We lived in different states, but we would, communicate on the phone quite often. And
Yeah.
so our relationship definitely changed. I'd say after about 8 months, my mom finally said, I don't enjoy this. I want to have that close relationship like we used to have. I want to be able to talk about things, and I want to kind of I want to be able to put our differences aside of what we believe. And at no point did I try to change their mind or try to say you shouldn't believe the way that you believe. I was just asking for, I just was saying that I want to be transparent. I want to be transparent with who I
Yeah.
am, and I want a real, genuine relationship. And so I was proud that they were able to do that. I was proud that they were able to kind of look at, put the relationship before, what they had been taught, what their parents had been taught, and theirs, generations before them, and to put our relationship first. And so, yeah, we started to kind of rebuild that foundation of our relationship. And it became more of an adult relationship. It became more genuine, less controlling, um,
Yeah.
very freeing. Felt very good. And so I was married at that time. I was getting married, and uh, you know, I felt that we could be a couple in front of them. I felt like there was quite a bit of support around that, but there was still this a little bit different. There was still a little bit of a difference between my brother and his heteronormative relationship and how they would act around them, and then how they would act around my ex-wife and I. And so um, since then, I've gotten divorced, and I am with a partner now, and so it's been about, I guess, 8 years or so since I originally came out, and I
Mhm.
believe it was last year where I was having a conversation with my mom, and she said, I don't really know. I don't know if I believe it's right. I don't know if I believe it's wrong, and for her to be able to say that was progress in my mind. Yeah, so that was pretty awesome. And they're very, very happy with my current relationship, very happy that, you know, I'm happy. And I think that that's been pretty cool to see that they can have that. They can be they can have questions, and they don't have to know all the answers, and they can still be loving and in their capacity. So yeah, that's been a journey for sure. It was pretty interesting and pretty eye-opening when I came out to discover different areas of myself. I started discovering I loved doing woodworking projects. I discovered I love hiking and backpacking, and just a lot more of who I am came out. And because I was able to love myself more genuinely, I could also love others better.
Yeah.
Um, so that was great. It was really eye opening to discover what a toxic work environment I was in. One of my closest friendships was very toxic, and so I began to create a habit of setting healthy boundaries for myself, and leaving a lot of situations that were not healthy. I would say my life is 10 times healthier than it was before. Just being able to genuinely be yourself and know that you have value, and you know say what your needs are. So that's been an awesome process. I mean, that's a huge part of who I am. It's not all of who I am, but it's
Yeah.
definitely yeah, a lot of what has kind of
That is
helped.
awesome. That is
Thank
really awesome, and the fact that you can kind of take this time to really reflect on the changes is really awesome. To kind of bring us back a little bit, before 27, right? When you are going through puberty, you're going through your earlier years. What age did you realize that or when did you start seeing signs or feeling that you were different than what people told you to be?
I remember the first girl crush I had. I was about 7. And I mean, as much as you can have a crush at 7, was the
Yeah.
lifeguard that was about 10 years older than me. I don't know. I loved her shades. They were super cool sunglasses. And, and
Yeah.
so yeah, but probably about fourth grade was when I started realizing like girls were having crushes on boys, and talking about wanting to kiss them, and and I think I kind of pretended that I did too. I was like, oh yeah, and I mean, you could think someone's cute, but
Yeah.
not have that attraction. And so I think I just thought, oh, they must feel like I do, like, oh, that's a cute looking person, but I didn't actually have those desires.
Yeah. And then as you're kind of like growing and seeing all of these different things, was there a point that you kind of thought like, what does this mean? How do I maneuver these parts of my life? I know that you talked a little bit about kind of like the religious aspect of kind of understanding like this is wrong and I need to fix this, but when you're kind of thinking to yourself as a young person going through like hearing your friends and going through church and stuff, what was like your thought process in that time? Like, what were the things that came to your mind of like, how do I fix this?
Yeah, it was very confusing, and I remember thinking maybe it'll go away, or maybe if I pray enough, or maybe if I just do do the actions of trying to date, men, and that'll just come. I wondered kind of deeply if a lot of women felt the way that I did, but that it just wasn't accepted. And I just, yeah, it was really confusing. I remember having crushes on girls throughout high school and not being able to ever say anything to anyone about that. Hearing like how other friends, hearing sorry, hearing how other
It's
friends would
okay.
talk would talk about dates or this and that. And then the first boyfriend I had, I was 16, and I believe we dated for almost a year, and there was just no sexual attraction that I felt, and I thought maybe that's normal. I mean, I think your brain does a lot of weird things when you're not able to actually talk to anyone about something. And so, I tried to date often. I mean, until I was 27, I probably dated 30 different people, not long term at all, just, go on a few dates. And I'm like, man, I just can't picture myself being married, in this way my whole life. And
Right.
I didn't want to get so far along in relationships to mess with anyone else's emotions or heart. So I thought really that I would just have to be single for the rest of my life, and I was trying to kind of come to terms with that.
Yeah. Now, kind of being older and going through it and kind of now finding yourself more authentically, what do you think you would kind of give somebody advice as far as them going through that time in their life?
Yeah, I think especially if you're raised pretty conservatively religious, just to recognize that it's not your fault, it's not a sin, there's nothing wrong with you. I think a lot of people hold tightly to religion for various reasons. It can create safety, a sense of community, and questioning your beliefs is very, very challenging and very scary for a lot of people. Doesn't matter how old you are. I think that a lot of good things came from that as well, but I think trying to find someone that you can genuinely talk to, whether maybe it's not your immediate family, maybe it's a counselor, maybe it's someone that has some experience and has knowledge about differences in people, and that can really help you kind of be able to be your genuine self. It takes a lot of courage to do that, because relationships definitely can change, and you can't always have control over how another person may take that news or react to that, but it's always worth it to be your genuine self, for sure.
That's awesome. I think it's such a good thing to hear. Like it's really the perspective of like the more authentic you can be, the more likely you're going to enjoy life as a whole. And I think that that's something that I typically like to highlight in general for everyone because we all, you know, queer or hetero or whatever. I think everybody should really live authentically themselves. The more that you hide who you are as an individual, the harder it is to just live life. You coming out later in life in your 20s, now you kind of have already also created a uh, community of people that your friends, the people that are going to support you. But before that, growing up in a small town, how did you think it was to be queer in that town?
I think I just definitely felt different, and didn't know anyone else that felt the way that I felt. And I definitely did not feel like that would be accepted by anyone in the town, even though a lot of my friends and people I knew were not religious. And it's pretty interesting 'cause one of my very good friends at that time is now openly in a lesbian relationship, and it's funny when you look back and you're like, oh, we were kindred spirits, like we knew before we knew. So it's kind
we
of
should
cool.
have we should have talked back then. We
Yeah,
could have had each other's
seriously.
back.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a different perspective when you start looking back. And even I think a lot of us have that that moment where you knew somebody that you were friends with when you were younger that now you look back and you're like, man, we should have talked way more than we did.
Yeah, exactly. We had no idea how much we had in common.
Yeah. So between the ages of 18 to 27 and officially being completely you, what is your like biggest ups and downs during that time that you think would really help other people kind of figuring out life as an adult before kind of truly living authentically?
When I went to college, it was a very small Christian school, lots of rules, lots of curfews, separate boy dorms from the women's dorms. And it was unspoken rules like go to chapel 3 times a week, not required, but if you don't, then everyone will know about it. Um, I uh, I
Not
played.
required, but if you don't show up, we're gonna put your picture on the wall.
Yeah, exactly. It was very much they had a saying that was ring by spring or your money back because like I don't know 70% of the kids that went there got married. And they would literally like all propose under the clock tower, show videos of their proposals in chapel. It was just so funny. And so I played softball my first year, and again, kindred spirits. There was a girl when I had come to check out the school for softball, and we just hit it off. Well, the next year when I went to school there, she had got caught having a relationship with a girl, and they completely separated them. So she had to live off of campus. They weren't allowed to look at each other. They weren't allowed to have classes in the same classes, and they had to go to extensive religious counseling. And so I mean, everyone kind of knew about it. It was a small enough school to where that kind of thing spreads pretty quick. So my yeah, my freshman year, one of our friends in our friend group, her and I were attracted to each other, and would secretly hold hands and do things like that, and no one knew about it. So one night we had a sleepover and ended up kissing, and I was a terrible person. I completely ghosted her the next day. And I was terrified. I was like, "Oh my gosh, like we did the ultimate sin, the worst thing you could ever do." And yeah, so that was kind of the end of that friendship, sadly. And then the following year, I got a call from the dean of admissions that I needed to talk to her about an occurrence that had happened the previous year, and it was about that situation. And at the time, I didn't know why or what had happened.
Right.
So she asked a lot of detailed questions and, about how terrible that was and, that I will never do it again. And even though, there's confidentiality in college, I think at that age you're just terrified. They're going to tell your family, tell
Right.
everybody you know.
They're gonna out you
They're going to
immediately.
totally out you. Yeah. So I don't know. I kind of put that in a box somewhere. I went there for 2 years, and then I ended up moving to Spokane with one of my best friends, and finished my college years at Eastern in Spokane. And yeah, I believe I was about 22 when I looked her up. I looked up her social media, this girl from the college, and I saw that she was openly out as a lesbian, was with someone, and I was just like, "Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, like how did she do that? How did she get the courage to do that?" And at the same time, I was like, "Oh, that's wrong still because I'm still in that conditioning."
Right.
Envious, but thought that, "Oh, it's still wrong." And so I remember
Now
I
you're
had,
like that bitch.
yeah, how dare she? How dare she be genuine?
Right.
It's Yeah. And so I remember I had reached out to her. I'd sent her a message and like, "Hey, how's it going?" Hoping to chat with her, and she just wasn't on her social media very often, so I don't think she ended up seeing it. Yeah, about that time, about 23, is when I had told my cousin, and he had told me about his own personal experience, and we kind of talked through that together and started reading books and looking into things. And I dated guys, and there just wasn't the same type of emotional connection that I felt even in that short interaction with our friendship when we were only
Right.
20 years old. And so, I kept trying and kept trying to make that work. And then, yeah, since then, I mean, her and I have reconnected, and it's been pretty cool. We've visited each other a few times and kind of talked about both of our experiences. And the college had, what did they do? They sent her to a conversion camp, and she had to do a lot of questionnaires and things, and tried to reverse her thinking, and it was pretty crazy. Um,
That is so crazy.
yeah, yeah, pretty wild. So
And how long was she at that conversion camp?
I believe it was 6 months or so,
Yeah.
but she was explaining to
And
me
it
it's one
didn't
of the
work.
best things that, yeah. She goes, that's actually part of the reason why I could come out and could, because it was like proof, that there's nothing
Yeah.
that made me this way. There's nothing I can do to go back, and there's not some traumatic event where I need to rewire my brain, and so she's
Right.
like, to their detriment, they actually helped me come out earlier.
Thanks to them, I find out that I was genuinely me the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, dang, I guess I should have
That
stayed 1 year longer and just done the conversion camp.
well, I definitely don't think we should have done that. Um, but definitely that is a wild adventure, and amazing that you can, technology is really amazing. The fact that we can kind of reconnect with some of these people that, we probably would have never seen again in our lives just because of how things happen. So that's awesome that you got that experience and being able to kind of build and grow. And I'm sure that now you're able to kind of really open up and talk to them a lot more. Now, with your cousin, being able to kind of have somebody to like bounce off those ideas with and stuff, what were like the main things that you talked about when you first built that relationship?
Yeah, we've always been really close, and so it was really easy and really just affirming that neither one of us were surprised, that we just wanted what was best for each other. We talked a lot about what that might look like coming out with our families, how they may respond or may not respond. We talked a lot about if we would feel guilty living that lifestyle genuinely. We talked a lot about the verses that we were taught were the reason behind uh, not being gay, and what they actually were about, which was a lot of, you know, taking advantage of young children and no consent. Yeah, and so we talked a lot about those things, and really thought very similarly about those topics. I think that he was about 6 months or a year or so before I was really comfortable with it. I remember when he first started reading some books, still feeling not comfortable enough to do that yet. But we both just held that space for each other to be able to do, to take it at our own pace and
Yeah.
our own process.
Yeah, and I think it's awesome to be able to find somebody kind of also going through that mind battle at the same time, because it really gives you
Yeah.
that open space to where both of you are kind of, I won't say lost, but like kind of traveling in the same path together. So you guys come across similar issues, come across similar topics that you want to open up about, which I find to be um, really amazing, because not everybody gets that opportunity to have somebody like right there with them. So that is amazing.
For sure.
Um,
Really fortunate.
yeah. So I know that we talked a little bit about your family and kind of that process, um, in your intro that you had talked about. But as your family relationship, I know that you kind of went through like a rocky patch. What do you think helped you kind of get to this new place with being able to kind of rebuild that relationship in this new way?
Yeah, I mean, it was helpful that I was beginning a relationship with someone, and so I didn't want that relationship with that person to be something I would have to hide, or something that I would have to pretend that it wasn't. And I think that probably sped things up a little bit in that area. I think I saw a lot of potential for their ability to love genuinely, for their ability to to grow, even though I didn't know how fast or what that would look like exactly. And yeah, I feel like I was really nervous and really afraid of the unknown, of not knowing exactly how they
Yeah.
would respond. But yeah.
What so I know like in your path with your family, you have been very open in accepting their questions and being kind of really receptive to this growing process. What do you think is the like funniest thing that they have asked you in kind of this time this path?
I guess you could say it's funny in a way. Like my dad, when I first came out, he was like, "Oh, is it because I played softball with you all the time?" Like, because I was definitely a lot more athletic than my brother, and so um, sports are something that he always really enjoyed, and my brother wasn't gonna grab the bait with that, and so I
Yeah.
loved sports, and so him and I would always be outside throwing the ball or doing whatever, and and then I got into boxing. He coached boxing, and so he was definitely internalizing a lot of that. Like, oh, maybe if I wouldn't have done this, or maybe I should have encouraged you to wear dresses more, or do
Yeah.
girly things. So I thought that was kind of funny.
No, I think that is super funny because I think a lot of parents probably resort to like thinking about a lot of this stuff about like what did I do wrong, especially when they have the perception of being gay or in any way, shape, or form kind of being a really negative thing. I think they jump to that, right? Because they raised you. So like to them, they did it as well. So being able to kind of talk through that, I think is super funny. And it does kind of it makes me laugh in the way that like certain things that people think about because like there are plenty of straight women that love sports and love men.
Yeah.
So like I always find it funny when like people connect some of the things because I'm like, but what about this whole community of sports players that have husbands? Like, what
Yeah,
about all of them?
exactly. Like playing a certain sport changes your sexual orientation.
Yeah, yeah. We gave you too many softballs. It just made you not like men.
Yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
yeah, one doesn't add up to the other, but it's a good try in figuring that one out. I want to kind of dive in a little bit into your dating experience. So, with people that maybe are trying to figure out where to start dating, what to start doing, where did you officially start your dating journey?
So my ex-wife was the first woman that I ever dated or had strong feelings for, and I would say don't do that. I would say date people. I think that I hadn't ever experienced having another female find me attractive, give me attention, like have those type of butterfly feelings, and that kind of overshadowed a lot of other things that became the most important thing. And I think that it's interesting when you come out when you're 27, 28. It almost feels like a lot of kids date when they're 15 years old. They have by that point 12 years of
Yeah,
experience dating, at least in a genuine, authentic way. Um, Hetero people that can be hetero.
yes,
um, and so yeah, I would say like for I think one of the very first steps would be to work on your self worth. At least for me, if I could go back, to building that first, to realizing like people will find you attractive. People will want to date you. It's not going to be one person in the world, the only person that's ever going to find you attractive or give you attention. It might just be the first. And so to just like build your self worth, build that by finding a community of other people that understand you and that may have similar histories, that just can understand where you're coming from, that are free to be
for sure.
themselves, that have also done that work of valuing themselves and being in that place. And I think once you're in that place, then you're going to be able to date people not with finding your value through how they might see you or the attention they give you. You already have that value, and then you'll be able to discern, are we compatible? Do we have similar values? Do we have similar interests? And is this someone that I can see myself being committed to?
Yeah, for sure. And I think the journey is hard, right? Because you're coming to who you are authentically later in life. And so like even your growing pains, you were growing to fit a specific mold. Now you're like almost regrowing. You're almost like refiguring out everything. And I've actually said this multiple times, and I find it to be so funny how true it fits for so many people. But the moment I feel like you officially start living authentically, you kind of go wild. You're like, oh my God, this person said, I love you. We're getting married.
Yeah.
Like, this is it. Um, and it happens, I feel like, to so many of us because you've lived in like this closed space for so long that now you are almost so free. You're like, I'm just gonna, I don't, let's let's keep going until I hit a wall, I guess. Like I'll just figure it out as I go along. And so after you get divorced, how did you restart your dating journey?
It was definitely a little messy. I remember my counselor saying, "Oh, this you feel good right now. Tomorrow you're gonna feel like shit." It's a roller coaster ride,
Right.
and I definitely, looking back, know what that means now. I wasn't ready to start dating right away, but I was definitely ready to have attraction, to date, to go on dates, to have that experience. There's a lot in of detail within like my past relationship, but feeling feeling desired and attractive wasn't really there anymore for
Hmm.
the last good chunk of it. And so I definitely wanted that, but I didn't want the oh darn it. I didn't want the I didn't want the hookup culture either. And so
Yeah.
I found myself interested in women that actually wanted relationships. So it got messy because I wasn't ready for that. So there was definitely there were a few situationships, I guess you could call them. um and yeah.
There are a few women out here that might dislike you a little.
Yeah. Yeah. There are definitely a few women that are like, "Oh, I met her in that phase. I met her in that stage."
Yeah.
Not my proudest stage, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I think everybody has that moment in time. I think it's you're able to value yourself so high now because you see what you actually are looking for, but at the same time you're still like dealing with your past trauma. So like you're in this like middle phase where like for me anyway, when I was in that phase, the first red flag I see, I would like ghost people.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And I just felt like it wasn't fair to be processing so much about a previous relationship. If someone wanted to be in a relationship, and I
Yeah.
didn't want to trauma bond. I wanted it to be that I was ready. And so I really tried to take that time, even though I still wanted connection, I think. So that was kind of the balance and the ebb and flow and the kind of that difficulty. So I found myself like as I began to heal and as I began to move past the past relationship and kind of have a lot more insight into it with distance. I went from being married to like no contact basically, and still haven't. And so I feel like that was the best thing in order to move forward. So I took that time, and then I met my current partner 3.5 years ago. We were office mates at a job that I was only at for a month or so. And when I worked there at that time, I was about to get married. She was married to a man, and so I just knew every time she was there, I was like, oh, this is awesome. We would just talk and get nothing done. So we definitely had a strong, in my mind, friendship connection. And over the years, I we didn't really talk that much, but there were a couple times where we said, "Hey, and how's it going?"
Yeah.
And so I reached out to her one night, and I definitely got into drinking. That was part of my problem too. So one night I reached out to her after drinking too much, and she laughs because I said, "How's it going?" And she's like, "Oh, not that great." And I forget exactly what she said. I ended up passing out, woke up a couple hours later. "Hey, how's it going?" I think I asked her 3 times. And I'm like, wow, I can't believe you still talks to me. Oh, it's bad.
Yeah,
So,
you should have
yeah,
got blocked.
yeah. Who is this crazy person? Oh man, not the proudest. So we hung out. I came up to Spokane and met up with her, and we went to a farmer's market with her kids and just spent all day hanging out. And it was the best day ever. It was just like, wow, this is so great. It's just awesome connection. And but I knew I still wasn't ready for a relationship. Like we knew that we were interested in each other, and we had a lot of very open communication about that. She also has 3 kids. And so it's definitely a lot for me to process, like that kind of lifestyle, as I didn't want kids originally. And so, yeah, I also lived about an hour and a half away, which I think was good at the time. So I'd come up on the weekends and we'd have fun and visit, and I'd get to know her kids. And so we were good friends for about 5 months before we started dating. And when I asked her to date me, I had decided to be sober, and was for a couple weeks at that time. That was another thing that I knew I was struggling with and didn't want to bring into a relationship. I just wanted
Yeah.
to be ready before starting. So yeah.
That's really awesome to be so thought out in that process. I don't think enough people really think through that entire thought process when dating. Like even being able to say, before I really get into a relationship, I want to be sober and I want to be able to do these things. I think being able to take those steps is amazing. So congratulations on all of that.
Thank you.
Um, in your dating space, like when you're single and figuring it out, were you more of a real life interaction meeting people, or did you use apps like everybody does nowadays?
Yeah, I definitely joined some of the apps. I met some people through Facebook, dating, because I figured, well, at least if we have mutual friends, or I can kind of see who they are a little bit better. And then I'm not someone that likes talking to someone for a really long time before meeting in person. And so if it looked like we had similar interests, and I thought they were attractive and we talked a little bit, then I would just say, let's hang out. And so there were definitely a few people where we hung out and went to music or went out to eat or things like that. Yeah, and I felt like that was a good experience, and I'm glad that I did that. I'm glad that I was able to do that before being with my partner now.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people listening, I would say that in the dating realm, for everybody who's basically living on apps nowadays, meeting people in real life, like, it should move from the app to real life, not from one app to another app to another app conversation. Um, because I almost feel like sometimes you talk to people and they're like, "Oh yeah, I met this person on Tinder or Grinder or whatever," and then they're like, "Oh, but now we talk on Instagram." I'm like, "That's not a level up
Yeah.
of meeting somebody. Like,
It's the
you gotta
same thing.
actually, yeah, you gotta meet them in person and like be actually know that they're real and not like a catfish."
Yeah, I did find it was really interesting with women. One thing I found a little confusing is there were kind of a lot of women questioning their identity on there, where they've been in previous hetero relationships, and they would say, "Oh, I just want to meet friends." But then you meet up as friends and you could tell it would be more, or they weren't sure if they wanted more. And so, yeah, that's one thing that I think just trying to be really transparent is important when you're like dating on apps, and really be genuinely truthful about what you're looking for.
Yeah. What is a couple of things that you learned by being on apps that people should be weary about if they were a lesbian looking on an app?
I had a lot. Saw a lot of people that were I didn't meet them. Let's be clear. But there were a lot of people that just don't really want to meet up, that were just really wanted like sexting, for lack of a better term, or they just want that immediate gratification, whatever it might be. But they may come off like they want to date, and so you just really have to be cautious. Not a lot of people are genuine, and it's really hard to tell until you actually meet someone in person.
What do you think is a number one red flag that people should look out for?
Hmm, that's a good question. Huh. I mean, any profile where it's a bunch of pictures of someone in like bra and underwear or like sexy pictures. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to sound judgmental, but that that's probably giving you a pretty good clue that that's what they want.
Yeah. I think that is not being judgmental at all. I think a lot of people don't realize the amount, or what's the phrase? A picture's worth 1,000 words. I feel like a lot of people don't realize like every picture you put on your profile and like the things you put on your profile speak volumes to like what you're looking for and what the vibe is. I feel like even on a lot of apps that I had been on, I feel like so many times I would go and like look at people's profile and like they would message you and it would be all about how like they want like something real and they want all this stuff, and then you go to their profile and it's like all slutty photos, and then the top of the profile is like hookups only. You're like, this, you don't even
Yeah.
know what you want, you know? Like,
Yeah. Yep.
yeah,
It's like they're
it's
trying
an
to say the right
adventure.
thing to get people interested.
Yeah, next thing you know they invite you over for Netflix and chill, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And you're like,
And Netflix
this is
isn't
not
even
what I
on the
signed up
TV.
for.
Yeah.
That part exactly. What initially got you into another relationship? Like I know that like you did a lot of like finding yourself first, but where in that path did you say, okay, I feel like I found myself because I did these things and I'm ready for a relationship?
I think that I mean, I did a lot of work with my counselor. I had a lot of time where I lived in a tiny town with not knowing a lot of people well. My close friends were in Spokane, and so I had a lot of time to myself. I feel I was able to process quite a bit and
Mhm.
grow through that time, and just having the friendship first with my current partner for 5 months, where she was able to really help me value my like put not do it for me, but help enable me to grow and be patient with
Yeah.
however long that took. There wasn't a date. There wasn't like by this time we need to be together. And I think in her mind it was like, well, we're just going to be friends, and I'll be okay with that. But I kept finding myself wanting kind of to know her deeper and wanting to know more. And so there was this barrier and this balance where I couldn't really expect that. And then still say that we're just friends, but I get all the
Right.
benefits of having a relationship. But let's just be
Right.
friends because I feel safer. um, and so I think that there just came a moment where I was like, I feel like I'm ready. I feel like I don't want to desire these things, and then you have things on your heart and you can't share them, and I just wanted it to be more genuine and authentic and real. And I felt like I was ready. I felt like I kind of started building relationships with her kids, and that yeah, we were in a good spot to start from there.
Yeah. And that's awesome. So, if you could go back to your 7-year-old self, what would you tell them?
That is awesome that you picked 7, because I feel like that's when I knew myself the most. um yeah, I would just tell myself to be who I am, and to be able to know that the way that I feel, that there's nothing wrong with that we are all
Yeah.
created differently and uniquely, and that you're parents will still love you.
That is awesome. I find it to be that a lot of us in this community, we spend so much time seeing our friends and people that we talk to and everything live life a specific type of way. And I feel like a lot of us are sitting there contemplating what that means, like what it means for them, what it means for us, like of not feeling like you fit into certain things. People talk about certain conversations at that point that you're old enough now to like understand, but you're not sure what to say because what you want to say is not what everybody else is saying. So you start agreeing with them on whatever they're saying because you're like, well, that sounds like I should say yes to. Um, so I feel like that time frame is so important to us. And like if you had a person to talk to, what would you want to hear? And I think that that is amazing to be able to kind of just go through that process and be able to really talk to yourself at that age and encourage other people. So, how much of your identity do people at work know about? Do you answer questions that people ask you, or is it still kind of very like quieted?
Yeah, my coworkers know about my relationship because my partner and I work at the same company, so that makes it
Oh yeah,
kind of easy. But yeah, so they know, and then a lot of my clients, I'll share pictures with them. A lot of the clients with dementia, or just different clients that ask about what I did over the weekend, and I'll be like, "Oh, here's my girlfriend and I, and we went hiking, or we did this and that," and so naturally, if it comes up, then yeah, I'm open with anyone that it comes up naturally with, for sure.
yeah. And do you feel like you have been that way since you recognized your identity, or do you think that that has changed like as the years gone on, you've just become more comfortable with that?
I feel like it took a little while after I came out to be that open about it. I believe in the beginning, I would just say my friend and I, if people didn't know me, when I would be talking about my girlfriend, and definitely still kind of pull off that straight vibe. And when I cut my hair this short was probably when I started feeling more like myself. And then
Yeah,
I was going back to school and I worked at a wine bar for a little while. And and then it was funny because I would notice like the guys that would sit at the bar would talk to me like a bro, like it was like this talk like about cars and sports and whatever. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this is so nice that they can just tell that I'm a lesbian because I'm not just being hit on
yeah,
and asked if I have a boyfriend. And it's just like I would rather talk like a bro any day than that. So yeah, it's
yeah.
probably a couple years after they came out.
That is so funny. To bring this podcast to a close, the only way we know how here at Girl Bye, who would you officially like to say girl bye to?
I would like to officially say girl bye to MM because there was no respect for my boundaries, and what I needed was ignored, and I was not validated.
Period. I think that is the best reason to let someone go, for sure. And for people listening, it is so important. And we've talked about this before. You have to set your boundaries and you have to stick to them. They are what is going to keep you happy at the end of the day. What do you suggest people do when they feel like they're not being heard or listened to?
I think that is a very big issue. I think that there's a difference between not being heard and maybe being misunderstood. So I would err on the side of trying to have conversations and be clear about what that looks like and give someone, some grace. But if it's a boundary that is violated, I think it's important that you keep your boundaries and you make sure to stand by those, whatever that means. If that means losing a relationship, or if that means whatever that looks like, having strong boundaries is really, really important. Not to let someone just keep violating your boundaries.
For sure. One other thing I would like to ask you is with creating your boundaries, now that you've kind of gone through some relationships, some dating, some, all the ups and downs of real life and interacting with other human beings and bringing them into your personal circle, what is your method of being able to set and communicate your own boundaries with someone else?
I would say they have a lot to do with my values. I don't want to be, I don't want to have an intimate, I don't want to have an intimate relationship with someone that is on a different page with their the values that are most important to them. And
Right.
those values to me have to do with respect and integrity. And so if, for instance, lying is a big boundary to me, and name calling. Those are two of my major boundaries. I mean, I would say infidelity as well would be up there. And so, for me, those are deal breakers for me. In the past, I said they were deal breakers, and I didn't allow myself to break that deal originally. And so,
Yeah.
I would say, yeah, that's important to me. In my future is to stick with those for sure.
And do you typically like have like a sit down conversation and say, hey, let's talk about kind of where this is going? Or is this kind of like something that you think naturally happens?
For me, I like to have open communication always in my relationship. And so that would just be a conversation that typically would happen in a pretty new beginning of a relationship within the first month or so. I mean, I would want to know what that person's boundaries and values are and share my own.
Right.
And so it wouldn't be a surprise if if those boundaries were violated. They would know kind of the consequences of that.
Yeah. Right out the gate. You're like, we're not wasting any time.
Getting down to it.
That is amazing. So, any last advice or anything you would like to share before we officially wrap?
I would say don't be offended when if you're misgendered often. That happens to me quite a bit. And I mean, it's okay, you can be offended, but I just think it's funny at this point. So, I don't know, people have their
Yeah,
own life experiences and sometimes aren't around as many diverse people. And so I just say take it with a grain of salt and move forward.
I definitely think that, with the way we are now, in a society, I think so many people are very upset if they get misgendered or something happens. Right now, it's really a time to help educate people. If you do get misgendered, I mean, if somebody's doing maliciously is one thing, but a majority of people might just be doing it out of a mistake or, I don't think that for you, you probably get misgendered because you have short hair and somebody's like not really paying attention. And, I don't think that they're like maliciously doing it, but if they are, that's a different conversation. So for everybody listening, don't beat anybody up in the comments just because of that. It's not malicious. It's a time to just talk.
Sure, sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Nikki, for joining us today on Girl Bye and sharing your story with us. For everybody listening, don't forget to meet us every Monday, 6 p.m., where we drop a new episode of Girl Bye expressing someone else's story and how life can be normal and you can live authentically and enjoy life to the fullest. We'll catch you on the next one.